My name is Jola Ayeye, not Jols, and I am a podcaster. I co-host I Said What I Said and a screenwriter. I started feeling shy about it, but I used to describe myself as a storyteller because that's kind of what informs what I do either on podcast or with writing. Yeah, but genuinely, it depends on the context I'm in and what's paying me more at the time. So I'd been on radio. I think the first time I was on radio, I was like 22. It was quite random. It didn't have head or tail. I can't even remember what it was for. But a friend was working at a radio station and was like, oh, you should come and hang. And if you want to talk, it's fine. Like, didn't really have much going on. So I did that. I didn't have any strong feelings towards it. Then after that, our first live podcast was in 2021. And we did a live show in Lagos in VI at Civic Center. And it was really, really nice. It was a big gamble. We didn't really know what we were doing. We didn't know if people would be excited. We didn't know if anybody cared to come to a live podcast show. We hadn't been to any, so we didn't know what it was. But we just thought it would be nice to connect with our audience and see if we can make a go of live shows. And so we did one in Lagos in 2010. It was very nice. It was a lot of fun. It was very nerve-wracking and very scary, but it was a lot of fun. That same year, we did shows in Abuja and Ghana. And then since then, we've done shows in London and Manchester and Dublin. So we've done live shows, yeah. The thing I liked about podcasting, why I was attracted to it, was it didn't have the same rules as radio. So you could, in essence, not have to follow the same strict guidelines of what your network wanted or the rules that national radio has to follow. You could just create a space and figure it out on your own. But the main thing is you have to hold people's interest. They have to care about what you're saying. And so I think the way it has impacted me is it's helped me understand that a lot of times you should pay attention to what people want, but you can introduce them to new things. So a lot of the rules we have about how to do storytelling, how long should a film be, how do you design the arcs in storytelling, what happens in the first or second or third act, all those things are important. But what podcasting has taught me really is that sometimes people need to be introduced to something and then they'll go ahead with it. So I've been on radio before as a guest, and I used to listen to the radio rabidly when I was in secondary school. So you would know every number of minutes you're going to get an ad. They had to censor certain words out. There were conversations that just would be shut down. Once the person starts talking, the host would just be like, okay, madam, we understand. However, what we're talking about now. And, they would it just seemed like there was a lot of restriction in what you could do. And by the time I was finishing secondary school, that was when people radio hosts had big personalities. So there was Bimi and Tools, and they had designed these big characters or big personalities. So radio was also very difficult to get into. It seemed like a pipe dream. If you wanted to get into radio, you had to be somebody, know somebody. It just felt like there was a lot of sacrifice to be made before you figure yourself out. You have to craft. You have to be interested in doing music in a certain way, or sports in a certain way, or talk about the news in a certain way. And it was rigid. So you couldn't be a hobbyist and want to be on radio. You couldn't figure that out by yourself. And podcasting just allowed that. It just seemed like I would listen to some podcasts and you could hear the hosts figuring out their thought process as they are saying it, or saying, oh, what do you think? Don't you think it would be nice if we could? Or what of this idea? And they weren't shy or embarrassed to be wrong, because it didn't hold the same type of weight, because you could change your mind without letting this huge entity down or losing some company billions or millions of dollars. At the time, it was just very, very easy. And so I wanted to try it. And it seemed like a space for yappers, and I talk. And I think one of the fun things that I Said What I Said has been able to do is we don't have to have the same amount of levity to deal with a serious subject. The audience understands that we don't need to have a lot of levity to deal with certain subjects. And so people are allowed to combat our ideas or our opinions and we're allowed to combat popular opinions as well. So I do think one thing that I said, what I said, it has sort of like allowed space for people to have serious conversations, sometimes in quite an unserious way. It doesn't feel like you have to have this, there's heft to everything you say. You can work out your thoughts on your own, and you can come to a conclusion that works for you. Obviously, if you're trying to now impose something that works for you on larger society, you then have to treat it with levity. You have to be serious if you're prescribing something for the general public. But I do think one thing that has been nice has been helping lots of people realize faster, not that they didn't know before, but just much earlier, the idea that you can come up with very individual decisions for your life. Our society isn't big on that. Nigerians don't like that at all. But just, you can come to very personal decisions on how you run your own life much earlier on. A lot of times it feels like you have to wait till you're a big person with plenty money. But that's one thing I think we've been able to talk about and spread that idea like much faster. I don't really think of the backlash as real. I really don't, especially because once I get off of socials, it doesn't exist anymore. And I think millennials, Gen Z, we're brave and strong in a lot of ways, but we've become fragile in understanding what persecution is. You also can't pick and choose. You can't be gassed by like praise. When you see something that a lot of people like, you're super gassed and you love it and you're reveling in it and you're retweeting everything they're saying and you're saying exactly, see, these are my people. And so when people disagree with you, of course, you're going to fall to pieces because you get all your validation from that. So it's a good thing to learn, to realize that people are allowed to disagree, even strongly. You can't disengage from what they say, and you don't have to treat it the same levity as saying something at work that gets you fired. It's not the same. It really isn't. There's feedback that doesn't help you do anything. It doesn't aid in any way. Someone says, I don't like the podcast. That's just information. I can't do anything with that. If someone says, you and FK talk over each other too much, and you should try to remember to like speak one after the other, that is feedback. If someone says, sometimes the light is too bright and it gets a bit much on the eyes, that is feedback. And so filtering feedback is like, what's the use of this thing and how can I actually apply it? And getting feedback also means not being as sensitive. I'm a sensitive person. And so there's sometimes you take feedback on your work as an attack on self. So someone says, I would prefer this, or I didn't really enjoy this, or this is a way to make this thing better. And what you hear is, you're doing rubbish. That's not what they said, right? And because something is very precious to you, it's also, not only are you doing rubbish, you're wasting your time and you'll never succeed. Right? That's what you've heard from somebody saying, you guys talk too fast and you talk over each other. That's not what they said. So I think filtering feedback is really about case use. How is this useful? And is this actually going to help make this product that I care about better? Then also realizing when stuff is like personal bias. So if someone comes and says, I really wish you guys would just talk about more serious things. There's other podcasts for that. That's not what we do over here, love. That's not really feedback. That's again just personal opinion. So it's something you learn over time. And the most useful feedback I've learned is no free promo. So in 2020 or 2019, Burna's mom, Mrs. Ogulu, came to the podcast for an episode and we were recording. That was the first time we ever wanted to put video out. We didn't end up using it. So the first thing she did was she sat down and there was some bottles on the table. And I said, did they pay you for this thing? And we were like, oh no. She said, nonsense. And she took the bottle off and she removed all the labels. She said, if they don't pay you, you don't promote their stuff. We hadn't thought of it. We had never thought of it that way. I was so gassed to be there. And when we were done with the conversation, she was like, I had a really good time. You girls are very good at what you do. Don't give anybody any free anything. Nonsense. And she just walked off. And I thought it was so cool because she was taking us more seriously than we took ourselves. And we hadn't even thought of it in that way at all. Basically what that advice in essence was, because some people would take it and run with it in a stupid way. But what it really was take pride in what you're doing and have value for what you're doing, even when other people can't see it. because it's going to take a while for the opportunity to come. If you yourself can't see it as valuable, it will take much longer because everybody's going to want to take advantage of that. So yeah, it was the first time that I thought, oh yeah, that's true. They didn't pay us, and people pay for these things, so why not us? So yeah, that was really, really useful advice. I've gotten other advice, but that was the first time because that was much earlier on. Media in the Nigerian landscape is very tough, especially new media, non-traditional media, and I felt supported in big and small ways. So the first way I felt really supported was we had what I thought was a casual meeting with a potential label at the time, and they were at the time they were like huge, but they were taking us so seriously. I know this is what we'll do, and the next thing they were like, yeah, so we'll send you guys a contract. It's like, okay, like, I mean, sure, we didn't make them any money for like a year, but they took us very seriously. So that was the first thing. And then the second thing was there was a time when it was still fun and games, all fun and games, but people would randomly try and pitch to their like very corporate spaces. I think we should do an ad. And I said what I said, even if it's just one. Like, I really think so. Their bosses even they didn't really understand what it was, but they liked the podcast. And then the final thing was a few years ago, I think 3 years ago now, 3 or 4 years ago, we got a grant from Spotify, actual money, because not in kind. I know people love to do that with media people. They'll be like, we'll give you $3,000 in advertising space. Bro, I have bills. What do you mean? Or, we'll give you $8,000 in training. But they gave us actual money, and they had like parameters. They had guidance, but there was no, this is what you must do with the money. And that went towards helping us do our first international live show, our first show in London. And it made like a big difference, and it changed. Post the show in London, we could see like we were going on a good path, but as soon as we were able to plan and produce and execute a show outside of the country, the way people looked at us changed completely. So yeah, every time people have gone out of their way to give actual money support, like financial support, whether it's in like paid advertising or allowing a media business in like this kind of environment grow with those resources, is a very big deal. I think sometimes it comes off as a bit blasé, but media is really hard. It's like treacherous waters. You look foolish for a very long time as well, because when your friends are climbing the corporate ladder in like leaps and bounds, you're still moving at like snail's pace, but the impact of your work is outsized, and it takes a lot to get it done. So those things, when someone comes and is like, oh, I pitched to XYZ bank and they've agreed, and I'm like, what did you tell them we're doing here? Because they don't know, they just want to do it. And so stuff like that really, really matters. Like putting money behind like artists. So when you don't sing, you don't dance, you're just talking. Yeah, it means a lot. Also, I sent FK a text, a WhatsApp message about starting a podcast. She was like, yeah, sure. But we need to find someone to help us because we want to do it as well as we possibly can. So we didn't want it to be like really janky or record. We wanted to try and be slightly serious. But we said if it doesn't do well, we will delete it. In fact, we'll scrub it off the internet in a way that people will feel it was a figment of their imagination. Like, I swear these babes had, I won't refer to it again. And then we did the first episode, and for the time it did really, really well. And then we continued, and people really liked it. And we asked, I think our first guest was Gbéborùn at the time. She was like, yeah, I love what you guys are doing. I'm like, really? She came, and then from there it just started like growing. And then someone asked us if we would take ads, and we were like, oh, of course. That's what we do here, ads. we do that. And they had the way they wanted us to do it. Please, mind you, we've never made money before. We said, no, that's not how we do it over here. We will tell you how we do our ads. And so we started getting more serious. But the turning point was we had Central Bank was doing they were kind of throwing money at phishing scams, because that's why people didn't know what they actually were, and they would click on these links and their accounts would get emptied. So they were doing like PSAs. And someone who listened to the podcast in Central Bank started saying they needed to do something on podcasts. His only aim was to put money in. I said what I said. He didn't really know. And so they had was a shoestring budget, really. I'm not even sure it was the proper budget. I think it was changed from somewhere. And they came to us and they were like, yeah, we should read this ad during. And we're like, that would be so boring. What we can do, why don't we bring in a fraud boy and somebody who has been scammed? And when she explains what's happening, like, oh, she got this email, she clicked this link, he will explain what's happening on the back end. They were like, huh? I'm like, yeah, wouldn't that be more effective? Of course it would be more effective. And somehow they agreed. And they paid us. And we did it. And it started just getting progressively better from there. We were able to get like better guests. And we were able to figure out how we want to speak and doing things in our own way. And then we were like, oh, let's do a live show. And then we did a live show. Oh, let's do a party. And then we did a party. And it grew from just doing this fun little thing with your friend. Maybe we'll do it for like a year. It became a business, and it started to have like standing. Like people started to take things seriously from there. And the market opened up. It wasn't a hard plan. Like I knew it could be something, but I was not delusional about what it would take to grow a podcast in Nigeria at the time. And so it's any pocket of opportunity, we would take it. We weren't like as laid back, like, oh, the door will open, all these interesting quotes. We didn't live by that. If there was a potential opportunity to do something interesting or different, we would take it immediately. And that's how it grew to become a business. And now we're turning 8 in August. Fun times. Thank you. What song makes me feel unstoppable? There's a Thames song that's the vibe is it gives a very confident, like arrogant vibe. I have to sing it because I always forget the name. Something with the wickedest wine. Me and my girls with the wickedest wine. Yes, I really like that song. It just there's a very lazy, like, arrogance that it gives Lagos girl. That's the only way to explain it. It's like you and your bad babes just feeling yourselves. I really, that song makes me feel great. Yeah.